So welcome everyone to today's edition of the Take 15 podcast, created by me, Sally Walker of SW Career Coaching Limited. The idea behind the podcast is that I have a 15-minute coffee break length conversation with people who are in roles that are of interest to you as job searchers or career changers. I ask 5 information gathering questions to help you learn more about the role and whether it matches your expectations. So today's 15 minutes is with IT security professional, otherwise known as cyber risk expert, Matt Brett. Matt, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Sally.
Great to have you. Thank you. Yeah, good. Well, obviously, we've only got 15 minutes, the length of our coffee break conversation, Matt. So I just wondered if we could get started perhaps by you briefly just sharing with us what's been your career path as an IT security professional.
Yeah, sure. So as pretty much everybody in my sector who's probably over the age of about 35, I didn't start in security. So I joined GlaxoSmithKline straight out of university. I did a chemistry degree, but I moved into an IT graduate program. And then I did, for the first 10 years of my time there, I did a whole series of roles in IT service management, did some executive support, did lots of project management, vendor management, service management, managed the mobility services, mobile phones, brought iPhones into the organization, all kinds of stuff, but with a more pure IT sort of focus. And I kind of got to a point where I was kind of getting a little bit stale in those kind of roles, and I couldn't necessarily see that future pathway. I wanted to do something a bit different. And I took the opportunity to move into a role and acquire a completely new skill set doing Lean Six Sigma process and product improvement. So we used to go in and work with a lot of the supporting services in GSK, finance, IT, procurement, and it was really intense time of learning for me. Really loved it, and I did a lot of coaching and was coached, took a great amount of value from that, and then became a coach myself, teaching some of those skills. Really enjoyed that. I'm actually moved to security, like so many career changing moves. It was a mix of kind of strategy, opportunity, and a bit of necessity too. So the strategy was, it was clear to me, it'd been clear to me from kind of 2005 onwards that security was becoming more and more important. Security historically had been over in the side, the guys you never talked to in IT, the guys people didn't really want to see. And you know, with the rise of network connectivity and general use of the internet, it became a much bigger thing. We were talking about it a lot more. So there was a clear, obvious, and there's a big skills gap. So if you go out and look, you'll see there's about 2.7 million roles globally that are available, and so that makes 33,000 in the UK, 377 in the US, 377,000 in the US. So big opportunity. I'd done a piece of work with somebody in security, had enjoyed it, had impressed them. They'd become a bit of a mentor figure for me. And they actually ended up offering me a job. And the necessity bit was an internal restructure, which happens in all big organizations, which meant a change of focus and the capability that I was in sort of disappearing or moving into the business. So it was a great bit of timing, but it really helped me to move forward. And then I led a team of forensic investigators. We did fascinating stuff, collecting electronic evidence for internal and externally triggered investigations. And then I did a few roles in industrial control systems. You might have heard called operational technology. So the systems that run your manufacturing line or your HVAC or stuff like that, and a bit in the security program office. And in those roles, I built an agile skill set as well, which I'm now using a lot. And then after I was made redundant from GSK last year, I moved into a small consultancy called CRMG. So we are very much focused on using a pragmatic and risk-based approach. So we are practical. We recognize that security is a journey, and that the maturity of organizations differs. So we do all kinds of different types of consultancy, from structured risk assessment work to document authoring standards, things like that. And we're also looking to move into delivering a set of security products over time. So I'm involved in developing and launching our new Risk Genie risk assessment platform at the moment. And that's great for me because I'm reusing that agile skill set and the Lean Six Sigma stuff I've used alongside the security SME stuff I've developed in the last few years as well. So it's great.
Great, Matt. Well done. Lovely. And just so good to hear that kind of evolution kind of going on, and one thing kind of morphing into the other, and then using things you've had earlier in your career as well. Really interesting. So, give me, what's a typical day like as a cyber risk expert?
That's a great question, because when I read the question, I thought, what is a typical day like? And I think that kind of actually is part of the attraction, in that it is very variable. But if you want to split it into the 3 or 4 different things I do, obviously we work a lot with clients. We're working to understand their requirements. Sometimes we're training and coaching them in a methodology. Maybe we're doing a piece of work with structured delivery over time, and we're doing the standard kind of project delivery type work. But it's really about building that relationship with the client, and them being able to trust you as an individual and your organization enough to really share what the concerns are and what the work they want to do. Because often they don't, people understandably, if there's an area of risk, they're reticent about sometimes exposing that. Then there's the team working. So we've got a requirement. Sometimes it's a really difficult, hairy problem. How are we going to actually fix it? And I'm very lucky. I work with some very experienced security SMEs with decades of knowledge in these fields as well. So we do a lot of structured brainstorming sessions. But also, what I like about being in this business is because it's a smaller company. I'm regularly interacting with the founders, and actually I'm having some input into product strategy and design, sometimes even the business strategy. So that's a lot of fun for me, and that's something I haven't been able to do before. Then there's solo work. We do author documents, we do a lot of risk assessments, and it's sometimes quite detail orientated. And that's something, that's when I shut the door and really focus on that single piece of work. And then probably the most important thing I would say for somebody looking in security is you need a personal learning, personal development mindset. It isn't something that you do in the gaps. So and the reason that's important is because stuff changes at a rate in this field that I've not seen in any other field of IT that I've worked in. The threat landscape is evolving at a rate that's huge. For instance, huge amounts of discussion and thought going on about the what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, and how that affects the threats that will come towards us, what we're seeing in intelligence, what organizations should be doing to protect themselves in this environment. So it's not a nice to have. You must have a personal learning and development plan, even to stand still in this industry. So yeah, that's an important one too.
Really good point. Absolutely. So yes, a really varied day as you're describing there, and you've also alluded to, I can hear the things that you like about the role. Again, this new aspect of learning and the involvement with the kind of business strategy as well. Any other aspects of the role that you particularly like, Matt, but also any that you don't like? Are there any sort of areas you sort of least like, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose, definitely those things that you've talked about, the variety, the constantly evolution, the need to learn. And, like I think probably a lot of people, professional learning is something that before I moved into, I really struggled to motivate myself to do. And I find that much easier in this role to do in security roles, to do that, because it's a necessity to me.
Yeah,
which
interesting.
is kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Definitely enjoy being part of that smaller company. I was, in GSK for 19 odd years. When you're a small cog in a wheel, it's great to be. There's a lot less inertia in this role. Ideas that I come up with can be implemented. You can drive change a lot quicker, which is great. In terms of things that I'm less keen on, there's only really one thing I think about in security, and it's maybe a slightly strange thing to talk about, is we are forced by necessity to look at what's the worst thing could happen, and then think about how we would counter that. And there is a sort of danger that kind of leaks into other parts of your life if you're not careful.
Yes.
I have a teenage daughter. I have an 8-year-old as well, but she's a lot less, a lot easier to manage at this point. And it does sort of make you think, okay, well, what could happen? And you kind of use that approach.
Yes.
And sometimes it might,
yes.
yeah, a little bit, because actually staged carefully thought out catastrophizing is almost what we do in certain instances when we're thinking the absolute worst case, when we're doing a risk assessment, when we're talking about, the crown jewels information assets of a company and protecting those. What would happen if they weren't available?
Yeah.
How would the company function? So you do need to be able to demark when you're being a security professional from other decisions that you make in your life. And I think that is a small but slight downside to this kind of role. And you will find, when you talk to security professionals, they will, they'll have their LinkedIn profiles, which won't say very much about them.
Yes.
When I went through that career transition process, I was being asked to do things which I knew were correct about finding a new role, but as a security professional made me feel slightly nervous.
Interesting.
And we are generally quite introverted, at least by necessity, in what we share about ourselves, because people in security roles themselves are often targeted by threat actors. So
interesting. Yeah. Great. Gosh, that yeah, really interesting insights, which I hadn't appreciated properly, Matt. So yes, good, very good points. What about, I mean, again, you have alluded again to some of the sort of skills and qualities that you feel help you to be successful in your role, in cyber risk. Can you kind of summarize them for us though?
Yeah, so okay, so the main ones I would say is if you do have a risk-based risk experience in risk, it will really help. And if you don't have experience in risk, it's a good thing to go and get, right? Okay. So at a really simplistic level, security professionals will talk about there being no such thing as perfect security. So if we create perfect security, we'll also disable the business. Okay, so it's a little bit like insurance. You're taking money and you're buying down risk, and you're trying to think about what are the different types of threats that you face. So understanding those concepts, the fundamentals of risk management, and they don't have to be from a security. Risk management is a fundamental thing. You can apply it in lots of different areas. We're just talking about cyber. Okay, so that's a big one. Structured analysis and problem solving. Obviously, you need to be able to work with data. You need to be able to be comfortable in a complex environment where there isn't an obvious just do that solution. Very, very rarely is that an option for us. And then it definitely helps to have good written word document authoring skills. We spend a lot of time creating documents, but also reviewing each other's documents to make sure we get really high quality in what we do, and it's super accurate, because a lot of what we do can be audited, and it could even, if you're talking about, when I was in my old forensics roles, there was times when evidence could be in a court of law and people could be being prosecuted or not based on the quality of that evidence and how it was handled across its life cycle. So you do need that attention for detail. In terms of more general mindsets though, active listening, really super important when you're talking to a customer, and that relationship building. We have to interact with them as a person first, not as an organization. Having that appetite for learning, and obviously the attention to detail. If you've got some of those things, whatever your background, you will find a role in security. And there's lots of different roles that you can do and transition in because of that skills gap. People are a bit more open, particularly in things like training and awareness. If you've got a background in any kind of communications or training and awareness, that you will be able to find a role because those skills are at a premium. And organizational and personal change.
Yeah, lovely, great. Very, very helpful insights and nicely summarised there. Matt, just to finish then, any final kind of advice or insights you'd want to share with listeners, to help them find out, anything more about being in IT security?
Yeah, so a few things. So historically, security has been a sort of had a strong culture of developing and maintaining skills through certifications. So I went and looked at, okay, so if I was starting now, where would I start? So I have kind of the entry level CISM certification by SARCA. That's a pretty good one. If you've to start with, you can do sort of hothouse training on that in a few days. Similarly, there's a one called CompTIA Security Plus, which is a good starter, and there's the ISC Squared, who are a great organization, they now have a new entry-level security certification. So these are things which
Brilliant.
are of a reasonable cost. You can start with them. And what I would talk about certification is you can go as far as you want in that. What your first certification needs to be saying to people is, I'm not in security, but I'm serious about transitioning. And that's all really. You're taking that step to show people that you really are serious. You've thought about it. And it's almost more important that you can talk about the research you did to get to doing that certification than it is the knowledge you get, right?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Obviously, there's loads of free groups out there, meeting groups. Some of them even meeting in person now is quite exciting. Get a bit dizzy when we go and meet people in person at the moment. But use LinkedIn. One of my colleagues, ex-colleagues at GSK, she did an amazing job of transitioning herself from an IT role into a security role. And she used a great group, I think it was the London Women in Hacking or something like that. And she just built great coaching relationships. And that is the number one thing I'd say is talk to people, try and build coaching and mentoring relationships. And remember that coaching and mentoring is a continuum, right? And you might need a few of these people, some of them to reflect on your development and your career plan with you, others maybe to, actually give you that direction. There's an opportunity over here, or they might even be able to open up an opportunity for you if they think you've got potential. Certainly the biggest moves that I've made, I've always had an element of that.
Good. That's lovely.
Proving that relationship with somebody first.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. No, thank you.
So make that time to establish those relationships and use them, work your network.
Brilliant, brilliant. And that's a theme, funnily enough, that we end on, but I've heard in pretty much every other episode all about building these relationships and mentors to help people move forward and shift. So that's great to underline that, Matt. Matt, thank you so much for your 15 minutes this morning. Great to have coffee with you. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you. Bye-bye.